spaceless, timeless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal, incredibly intelligent, and morally perfect being. What does that sound like? Hey guys, I'm Bill Westers, and this is the Encountering Truth podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Encountering Truth podcast, where we examine the evidence for Christianity, engage culture with kindness and conviction, and encounter Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. I'm your host, Bill Westers, and we've got a good one for you today. So, the other day, my son came home from school, and he starts talking to me about what he's learning in science class, right? He's in 6th grade science right now, and the teacher tells him, they're talking about the Big Bang Theory, and the teacher tells him that, the Big Bang was when two planets or two asteroids, they collided together, and that's how everything came into existence, the whole universe. And if you have a little bit of sense and a little bit of a momentary pause to think about this, if that's when everything came into existence, I told him, did you ask your teacher, where did those planets or where did those asteroids come from? If that's when it all came into existence, well, how did those asteroids or planets come into existence to be able to collide together, right? So that got me to think that I want to begin to equip you guys to make a case for make a case for Christianity, but there's three very important arguments to make for the existence of God. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, the three main arguments for the existence of God. Now keep in mind that as we're talking about arguments, that we're not saying that you should go around and get in verbal spats with people and arguing about God and arguing about Christianity and what's true and what's not true. Because remember that if anybody gets mad in the conversation, you lose. If you make that person upset and angry because of your tone and your approach and you're condescending or rude or something like that, if you make that person angry in any way, you lose. And on the flip side, if you allow them to get under your skin and make you angry, again, you lose. So we're here, we're not trying to win an argument, we're trying to win the person. So when we talk about an argument, we're not talking about these verbal fights in a sense. We are talking about being able to lay out a case, lay out the evidence for Christianity, okay? Lay out your case for the existence of a God. And that's exactly what we're going to do with these three arguments for the existence of God. And these are, you may have heard of them before, they are the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, or also commonly known as the design argument, and then the moral argument. So we're going to start off with the cosmological argument. This is the argument that says that everything that has a beginning has a cause. And when we look at the universe, we know that the universe had a beginning. Therefore, the universe had a cause. Now, if the universe had a cause, then we have to think about what would be able to cause the entire universe to come into existence. Okay? And what is that then? Okay, so if the universe came into existence, that means that all time, space, and matter came into existence at the Big Bang. Yes, we're going to talk about the Big Bang, okay? Sometimes Christians think, oh no, he's talking about the Big Bang. That's kind of do we believe in the Big Bang? Well, yeah, we just know the Big Banger. We just know who caused it, right? God said, and it was in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. He is the big banger that made it all come into existence. So yes, we know there's a big bang, and because he is the big banger that caused it all to come into existence. Uh, so that being said, if all of space, time, and matter came into existence at the Big Bang, meaning before that Big Bang there was no space, time, or matter, then whatever caused the universe to come into existence, caused all of space, time, and matter to come into existence, of course, would have to therefore be outside of those things. It would have to be outside of time, outside of space, and outside of material, immaterial, spaceless, and timeless. Okay? And think of what would go into this, that if the universe came into existence, and the entire universe that we can't even fathom and wrap our mind around, then obviously that cause would also have to be enormously powerful. And get this, it would have to be personal. Now, why would we say it would have to be personal? Well, for things to go from nothing to something, there would have to be a choice that be made to cause everything to come into existence from nothing. And so there's who can make choices, right? Something personal would have to make the choice to bring everything into existence out of nothing. And so this is what we would call creation ex nihilo. It means everything out of nothing, creation out of nothing. And so this is evidence for God, because what else do we know? Do things just come into existence? Do things exist? Yes. Do they just pop into existence randomly? Okay. Well, according to atheist Lawrence Krauss, he would talk about, if there was this quantum vacuum with all these quantum particles floating around in space, and if you wait long enough, something will just pop into existence. Okay. That's stealing from God right there. If you think about it, he's saying this quantum vacuum. So nothing is not actually nothing in his idea. There's these quantum particles, and they're floating around in space. So you've got matter and you've got space. And he says if you wait long enough, that something will just pop into existence. Now, wait long enough? That means that there must be time. So this doesn't work. For all of time, space, and matter to come into existence, whatever caused it to come into existence would have to exist outside of space, time, and matter, and make that choice to cause it to come into existence. And so you might ask, if there is no God, if you ask an atheist, you might ask them, if there is no God, then why is there something instead of nothing? Either no one caused everything to come into existence, or someone caused everything to come into existence. Pick your miracle, right? It's either someone did it or no one did it. But we went from nothing to what you see all around you. Okay? So then going back to that story about my son's teacher saying, these two planets collided and that caused the Big Bang. Listen, two planets can't collide if two planets haven't yet come into existence. If you think about that, it's just, and he actually asked her, where did the planets come from? And she says, well, they were just there. No, they weren't just there. There was nothing. So you can't have something colliding when there's no something to collide, no space for it to collide into, and no time for that to automatically happen. You have to have some sort of outside cause. And what does that best point at? Something that is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal, to choose to make this come into existence, we're starting to head toward the existence of a theistic God. So that brings us to the next argument. This is called the teleological argument. It comes from the word telos, which means design or purpose. And it's a little bit harder to wrap your mind around, but what this talks about is how finely tuned this universe is in order for human life to exist. And then the amount of design simply in life itself, particularly human life. And so if every design has a designer, then when you look at the universe and life, they exhibit design. Therefore, there must be some sort of designer that would have specifically designed all of the universe and life, universe to be able to maintain that human life. Now, what does this mean? Okay, let's break this down just a little bit. We don't have a lot of time to go into all the details of any of these three arguments, but first of all, the teleological argument is based on these anthropic principles. Anthropic just comes from this Greek word that means human, and so it's just a way to talk about how the universe is finely tuned to support human life. Because there's so many things that if these things were just different by just such a infinitesimal amount, just such a tiny degree, then human life would not be possible. And in many cases, the entire universe just wouldn't even exist. And so things like the oxygen level on the Earth, the atmospheric transparency, the Moon-Earth gravitational interaction, and carbon dioxide levels, and gravity itself. There's over 100 of these narrowly defined constants that strongly point to an intelligent designer. And so I'm going to read this passage here. This comes from the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist book by Frank Turek. It says that the initial conditions of the universe were also finely tuned. For example, if the expansion of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back in on itself or never developed galaxies. In other words, the Big Bang is not a scattered explosion, but a finely tuned, guided creation event that continues to be guided today. Oh, here's a good one. If the gravitational force were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, then the sun would not exist and the moon would crash into the earth or shear off into space. And so there's so many different elements. The kind of galaxy that we live in, that's being a spiral galaxy, where we are in the galaxy, in the outer arm, what kind of star that we orbit, and the size of our moon, the kind and makeup of our atmosphere. All of these things have to be just right to be able to support human life. And so it's very obvious. The best explanation is that this extreme fine-tuning must have been done by an intelligent being. And the very same spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and super powerful being that chose to create the universe. Another passage, this talks about not only is the universe so finely tuned to support human life, but human life and life in general is so specific, and there's so much design that is very evident in that. Just one example of that is DNA. If you know and actually look at what DNA is and how it's structured, it's super obvious that this is like a messaging system, and we know that messages come from a mind. And so even the DNA itself, it shows you that this messaging must come from a mind of some sort of supremely intelligent being to design it as this way. So if we look at I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist book, again, it says these nitrogen bases are, talking about DNA, are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, which commonly are represented by the letters AT, C, and G. These letters comprise what is known as the four-letter genetic alphabet. This alphabet is identical to our English alphabet in terms of its ability to communicate a message, except that the genetic alphabet only has 4 letters instead of 26. Just as a specific order of the letters in this sentence communicates a unique message, the specific order of A, T, C, and G within a living cell determines the unique genetic makeup of that living entity. Another name for that message or information, whether it's in a sentence or in DNA, is specified complexity. I'll say it again, specified complexity. In other words, not only is it complex, it also contains a specific message. The incredible specified complexity of life becomes obvious when one considers the message found in the DNA of a one-celled amoeba, a creature so small several hundred could be lined up in an inch. Staunch Darwinist Richard Dawkins, professor of zoology at Oxford University, admits that the message found in just the cell nucleus of a tiny amoeba is more than all 30 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica combined. And the entire amoeba has as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. In other words, if you were to spell out all of the A, T, C, and G in the unjustly called primitive amoeba, as Darwin describes it, the letters will fill 1,000 complete sets of an encyclopedia. Now, we must emphasize that these 1,000 encyclopedias do not consist of random letters, but of letters in a very specific order, just like real encyclopedias. And that's just a one-cell amoeba. Think of how many cells a human has and how many sets of encyclopedias worth of DNA that is specifically coded to make you and me exactly the way that we are. Tell me that is not by specific design. A message comes from a mind. As William Paley puts it, every watch requires a watchmaker. Right? You don't stroll along in a forest and see a brand new beautiful Rolex and think, wow, nature created a Rolex. No, you look at the watch and you say, wow, this is a beautiful Rolex. I wonder who created it. Because it's specifically designed for a purpose with specified complexity. Now, there's so much more that you could look into on all of that, and so many more of these cosmological constants and things that are so finely tuned to support human life and so finely tuned within human life that it would blow your mind. But we have to, for time's sake, we have to move on to our third argument, the moral argument. Now, I have a whole other podcast about the moral argument and how it's evidence for the existence of God, but we're going to just reiterate a few of the key points here in this episode about the moral argument. The moral argument goes like this. It says, if there's no God, then there's no objective morality. But there is objective morality. Therefore, there is a God. Now, that brings us to the idea of, okay, what does that mean? So we're saying that morality is objective. What does objective mean? Objective means that it's based in an object outside of humanity, beyond us, okay? Not in the subject. It's not subjective, which is the opposite, where it's based in the subject or the individual or the self. No, it's based in an object, not in the person observing that. And so this moral argument is so accessible. It says that if there's even just one thing morally wrong out there beyond anybody else's opinion, it doesn't matter about who you are, where you live, or when you live. It's not about your opinion. It's just morally wrong, regardless of all of that stuff. If that's true, if there is something like that, like maybe torturing babies for fun, or killing 6 million Jews in a Holocaust, or flying planes into 2 towers and killing innocent people there. If there's at least one thing like that that's just morally wrong beyond anybody's opinion, then that means that there's a God. Why? Because you can't know what is wrong or what is evil unless you have some idea of what is good. And you can't have any idea of what's good unless you have an objective standard beyond yourself by which to measure that. C.S. Lewis quotes it this way. He says, my argument against God was that this universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe to when I called it crooked? Okay, when I called it evil. So there's something intrinsically written on our hearts that we all know that there is a real right and a real wrong that is not just based in the individual. It's not just based in government. It's not just based in society, which is just groups of individuals. So we know that morality is objective, because if it were subjective, anybody could do whatever they want and nobody could say anything about it because it's based in the subject. Where love would be no better than hate, and what murder and rape and slavery, none of that stuff would be wrong as long as it lined up with that individual's subjective standard of morality. But we know that's not how it is. And we know that this is that morality is not subjective or relative. Even though some people may want it to be relative, nobody wants anybody to be relativistic towards them. You know, another C.S. Lewis quote, as I said in our other episode, is that whenever you find a man that says he does not believe in a real right and wrong, you'll find that same man going back on this a moment later. He may break his promise to you, but as soon as you try breaking one to him, he'll be yelling, "That's not fair." And so, you know, if someone says, "Oh, well, it's all relative, you do you," or "That's true for you, but not for me," well, you know, if someone tries to tell you that, just take their keys and drive off with their car. You know, well, wait, that's my car. That might be true for you, but not for me. Doesn't work that way, does it? You know, he might think it's fine for himself to steal, but you try to take something from him. Wait, that's wrong. According to what standard? If morality is subjective and relative, it's based in the subject. It's perfectly fine for somebody to do that if it lines up with their own standard of morality. So back to the moral argument. So if there's a moral law, there must be a moral lawgiver. If there's an obligation, there must be someone to whom we're obliged. And it must be a someone, because you're not obligated to things. You are only obligated to persons. And so the existence of a theistic God is the best explanation, okay, for someone who would have the authority over all of us to tell us what is right and what's wrong. And so we all know that real objective morality exists, therefore there must be a moral lawgiver. And so that brings us to our summary. The cosmological argument. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. That cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal, to choose to create. The teleological, that's a mouthful. The design argument, we'll say that, says that every design has a designer. And when you look at the universe and how it's finely tuned and designed to support human life, and you look at life in general and how finely tuned and the specified complexity of it and the message that must come from a mind, every design must have a designer. And that designer, when you're talking about millions of letters of DNA, must be incredibly intelligent. And finally, moral law. If objective morality exists, there must be a moral lawgiver. And so that moral lawgiver must be morally good by nature. It is God's nature. So, summing it up, what does all this point to? Okay. A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal, incredibly intelligent, and morally perfect being. What does that sound like? Sounds a whole lot like the Christian God. Now, the trick here is, unfortunately, that doesn't get us all the way to the Christian God. It's just merely to a theistic God, that there is a God that exists, that created all of this and is above all of us. But I hope you got something out of this. This has been one of my favorite things to talk about lately, about how these three arguments are just such strong arguments. And granted, there are refutations, there are objections to these arguments, and we'll talk about them on different episodes. We're out of time for this one, but it's important to know those. And so don't think that you're going to just throw these at people and they're going to all of a sudden bow their knee to Lord Jesus, thinking that, oh, well, I never heard that before. No, there's going to be people that are going to fire back, and they're going to have their objections to it. And some of them are pretty strong objections, but when you examine all the evidence, you're going to find that what is the most reasonable explanation of all of this, of course, is the existence of God. And so eventually we'll try to look at those objections, but we're out of time for today. But so thank you so much for tuning in, for listening to the Encountering Truth podcast, where we examine the evidence for Christianity, engage culture with kindness and conviction, and encounter Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. If you got something out of this, please take some time and go and like our page, like our podcast, follow it, subscribe to the podcast, post it, share it with your friends. Listen, we're trying to get the word out. We've got some great things coming up that we just want to help people build their faith. We want to reach people that have never heard some of this stuff before. We want to engage culture with kindness and conviction, and we just need your help to get that word out. So take the time, please subscribe, get notified, and share it on social media, and spread the word. And tune in next time for the Encountering Truth podcast. Thanks.